who is from Nepal and deep seeker of peace studies. Um, Thank you so much, Professor Patnaik, for joining today's Sunday Subjects dialogue. Uh, 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 Professor John Galtung, inspiration for all of us who is a believer of Gandhian values. And for him, peace appeals to the heart. Studies to the brain both are needed, indeed indispensable, but equally indispensable is a valid link between brain and heart. And that, in nutshell, is what peace studies and peace practice are all about. So, for introducing the concept of John Galtung's contributions, I would like to invite Professor Ananta Kumar Giri, and then we will invite our respected speaker. Yes, Ananta, over to you.
Thank you, dear Randhir. Thank you, dear Bishnu Bhai, Professor Bishnu Pathak, Dr. Alok Tandon, and all friends co-present, Minati, Randhir, Gianluigi. So, Professor Johan Galtung was a multidimensional scholar and activist. And the living, experience of him that I had, that in 2004, he came to give a lecture at Aalborg University, Denmark. And I heard him. I was a visiting professor there. And then I met him and I gave him an essay that I had written. And the next day he brought and then he commented on that. And then that is how we met. And then I was editing a book then called The Modern Prince and the Modern Sage, Transforming Power and Freedom. And Johan, he very kindly agreed to write a foreword on that. So in this foreword, he's meditating on this idea of power by Prince from Machiavelli to sage. And then he is giving the life story of Saint Francis of Assisi, that how Saint Francis of Assisi, our friend Gianluigi is from Italy, and how Saint Francis of Assisi, now in Italy, not only Gramsci, who talks about modern prince in terms of party, or the prince in Machiavelli, but Saint Francis of Assisi, the way he embodied relationship with not only people but also with the wolf, the animals, because people who are inspired by Saint Francis of Assisi, they would leave the food at the corner of the village and the wolf would come and eat it. So Saint Francis of Assisi cultivated a kind of non-conflictual relationship between man and animal. And of course, St. Francis of Assisi was also very much interested in dialogue. He walked all the way from Italy to Turkey to meet the Sultan, and that was a profound meeting. And Johann Galtung himself was an activist of peace. He established Transcend, and our respected and dear brother Bishnu Bhai, Professor Bishnu Pathak, also has been an active, participant in this. And I took part in one Transcend, event in Norway. And a group in Norway, Norway is full of, I think Bishnu Bhai has gone to Norway, full of beautiful mountains and lakes. And in a community, every year, Johan Galtung would come and he would initiate the conversation on peace and the world event, and many people would come. And then in one meeting in 2010, I'm giving a little bit of personal reflections of Johan Galtung as a person. So in 2010, he came to the World Sociology Congress, which was happening in Gothenburg in Sweden, and he was invited to speak. And he had come with a lot many copies of the book that he had co-written with another scholar, and the name of the book is Globalizing God. And he himself brought these books and he was selling it to interested people, because this was printed by Transcend University, and it was his way. The university is printing a book and he himself is coming, and kind of the books are there if you like to purchase a copy. So at the same time, he was a profound thinker and a kind of an encyclopedic mind. And the peace studies that he founded drew inspiration from many sources, including Islam. And he was once telling that how did Martin Luther, the great Protestant reformer of Christianity, where did he get his inspiration from? And he says that he got it from Islam, because in Islam, that there is not necessarily a mediation between God and human being. So therefore, everybody can talk to the God directly, and the role of the priest is not that the priest is the exclusive possession of the road to the divine. And then he was very much interested in dialogue, especially after 2001, after September 11, 9/11. Johan Galtung was a great voice against Islamophobia, and then the present challenge that we have, like the Israel and Palestine. And even at that time, and we see the what is the predicament with the two nation or two state solution. And Galtung was saying that this two state solution would not work, because that even if we have two state solution, it has to be part of a 6 state and 16 state kind of frame. And we see that today the peace, the challenge for peace. And he was a critic of Zionism at this, and he himself was a Jew. And so that kind of a radical politics of creativity, of empathy, and drawing on Gandhi, but also he drew on Spinoza. He and his co-peace scholar um, Arne Nas from Norway. And we should not forget that Arne Nas and Johan Galtung together, they created in Norway a kind of a peace pedagogy, a philosophical peace pedagogy, building on the great work of thinkers like Spinoza, where in Norway, every university student, he is required to take a course on philosophy. And I am told the autobiography that Johan Galtung wrote in Norwegian, it is called Without a Homeland. So he was born in Norway, but he was a critic of the kind of nationalism of any closed kind, and his love and his sense of humanity, his friendship, his encouragement. So he was a deeply, deeply kind and lovable person who embraced everybody as a co-worker, and not with a sense of hierarchy. So this is the living the living presence of Johan Galtung that we live together with, as a person, as a thinker, as an activist, as well as a great artist of livable future. Thank you. Hello, Randhir. Hello, Randhir.
Hello, Ananta bhai, I think he's not in the meeting, I think.
Professor Bishnu Pathak, we invite you to speak, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Ananda Giri. I am now in the field of eastern part of Nepal, and I'm just letting you know that how I remember Professor Dr. Johan Galtung. And before than that, Professor Galtung was born in October 24, 1930, and family where most of the people thinking that a new doctor is also born, but later he finally died in February 17, 2024 at Oslo Hospital. And when he saw one accident, particularly how he started to this peace interest, I'm letting you know. Actually, when he was 13 years old and studying at Oslo, and his father name was that physician. He was physician August Galtung, and one day this actually Germany, particularly the Nazis force, arrested him and took him to into the custody. Then he started to think that, okay, how can I contribute to this peaceful world? So his mind then changed. Before than that, he was thinking again to be a medical doctor, but later he started to work differently. This is how his interest particularly changed. And one day when he was asked the librarian of Central Library in Sweden, asking for a peace book, but he said that they had none. I mean that. So he found that there is a definitely lack of literatures, in practical and theoretical as well. So his interests grew more profoundly. Similarly, one day he was visiting in Banaras of India, and he found that large number of people are sleeping on the street, and many children were hunger, and some people were almost due to this hunger and famine, almost in waiting for this death. So he started to think that how can I contribute to this peace studies, and finally he wrote to work in this field. Before than that, how do I connect with this Professor Johan Galtung? I'm letting you know when in 1999 October 13, I had been doing my PhD research at Danish Center for Human Rights, Copenhagen. And one day I heard his name even in Nepal, and I also had his email ID. I contacted him, but quickly he answered me, so that we started to connect. And now it is now 25 years more. We have communications, and I started to have a more communication regarding this conflict, because I had been doing my PhD on this conflict management and human rights. During that period, Nepal had been encountering Maoist launched people's war insurgency. and number of people have been extrajudicially killed, and there is no accounts of this enforced disappearance, missings, and arbitrary tortures, and inhuman, cruel, degrading treatment was very common. So that I asked him to support me to successfully accomplish my PhD, and he started to guide me. And when I completed my PhD in 2003, and then I started to, yeah, we have a very close communication on another time and again, and I started to say him as a academic father, and he also accepted. Not only Professor Galton accepted me in as an academic son, but his wife Fumiko also accepted me as a academic son. So I mean that we have that kind of relations. So on the way of that, I'm letting you know that actually, actually, he had two wife. One had been still had been working as a political leader in Norway, and he had three sons and one daughter in terms of this family matter. So actually, he developed a number of principles or theories. We can say that, but before than that, now when he had been completing his, PhD in mathematics in 1955, 1 year, another year, he also got a he also done a PhD on sociology. So after then that, he started to teach there in Oslo University, opening this peace and conflict study, and he worked there for almost 11 years. Finally, he had some that difficulties with this administrations and government as well. Then he left, but finally he again went to this Oslo and died at Oslo hospital. So he has a number of core principles he developed. Among these core principles, he developed conflict transformations. And conflict transformation, what is the meaning of this? Means that this is a new concept he developed. Before than that, there had been a concept of conflict management and conflict resolutions, but he developed this conflict transformations. And conflict has characteristic that either that can either affirm or destroy life, and that also the source of inspiration of growth and development. So conflict transformation actually has its own individual goals in this conflicting party, and it's stabilizing new goals. But later, when he developed the term, these conflict transformations, and he says that this conflict transformations established as a new common goals between this conflicting party, and it particularly focused to empathy, non-violence, and collaborative creativity. So means that conflict transformations theory has a now widely used almost in all these academic institutions. And regarding these conflicts and peace studies, I approximately can say that more than 550 universities have been incorporating these peace and conflict studies programs almost all over the world. So secondly, he also developed this violence, and then there are a number of violence. We can say that it is a direct violence, indirect violence, but within this even violence, this is structural violence, direct violence, and cultural violence. So he actually he started to his peace activism and he has a discipline, academic discipline. He first published the Gandhian's politics of ethics along with his mentor. So, I mean that structural ones, as we all know that there are number of these structural violence, direct violence, and cultural violence. So structural violence definitely finds almost everywhere, even in this poor country like Nepal to advanced developed country, and definitely naturally this is direct violence or indirect violence, definitely yes, and cultural violence as well because of this differences in religions, differences of cultural activities, differences in this professions, differences in this sexism and so forth. So he also tried to develop this peace matrix, peace educations, peace research, peace journalisms, among the others. So I mean this he has a developed number of theories, and among this these theories, I can say that even within this theory, even in conflict, he also divided this this is violence into during before violence and during violence and even after violence. So even within this conflicting transformations, he also tried to use his theory focusing to ABC triangle. We used to say that attitude, behavior, and contradictions are contents. So means that also similarly this violence also lead to this physical loss and emotional loss, institutional loss, societal loss, family loss, cultural loss, and so forth. So means that similarly he also try to develop this negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace, definitely yes, it is absence of war or conflicts, but positive peace particularly focus to this collaborative support in future. So means this is the word he also use in this word differently. Similarly this is the conflict triangles not only help to find out the problems, but it is also help to resolve the crisis. Conflict, we can say that conflict transformation, this is triangle. We can also say that once this Galtung says behavior, attitude, and contradictions act together to encourage violent conflict, means that I mean this conflict triangle has both sides, similar to the two sides of the same coin. This is one side is that conflicting part, and second one is that transformation part. So on the course of that, his this conflict triangle, first of all, this is had done a trial in this Guatemala in 1968. So later he also furnished a book, and this attitude, particularly on that particular this is Guatemalan case, he described this attitude means that repression, racism, trauma, and victimhood. Similarly, in this this is behavior context, he wrote genocide, insurgency, discriminatory act, and so forth. Similarly, this is in terms of this contradictions, he also magnified this inequality, exclusion, dispute over territory. So means that these are the things he developed, and his initiated development now spread all over the world. Even in during the course of Nepal, we had a civil war, and on the course of that conflict transformations and human rights approach, he first visited in Nepal in May to 2003, and he tried to resolve the crisis, putting almost all the stakeholders, government, non-government, and even diplomatic, leaders, as well as civil society. And he, during that period, I had also with him Professor Johan Galtung. And secondly, he also visited to this 2016 November, at the end of November, and it was organized out these peace and conflict study centers. And during that time, Nepal had been experiencing these peace talks, focusing to this, Maoist combatant, and as well as this, government. So number of Maoist leaders, we also, who held a meeting with them, and as well as we also held a meeting with this prime minister, even this senior diplomats, even many other political parties and diplomats as well. So secondly, thirdly, he also he was also invited in Nepal in 2012. So during that period, definitely Nepal had been again facing a crisis. That crisis was particularly, there has been a huge, expectations to the public that the new government will give this, job. This is, good educations and so forth. But as the government failed, there had been a, political crisis during that period. All political party sit on a in a round table. It was again headed by this Professor Johan Galtung, and finally agreed to hand over the this prime ministerial job to this Supreme Court Chief Justice, and he held the position Supreme Court Chief Justice, as well as Prime Minister of Nepal. And finally the election held, and Constituent Council election held. Finally, the elected body finally formed the, new Constitution of Nepal that proclaimed in 2015. So means that he has a very good, vocabulary in terms of that generosity, and in one type of unique, this is model of knowledge transferring and convincing the leaders as well as non-combatant. He play a very significant role to negotiate this between this Maoist, leaders and the then seven-party alliance and government. Finally, we also succeeded to restore peace and transformation of conflict in Nepal in November 21st, 2006. So this is what actually I work with this, Professor Johan Galtung. Now we can say that more than 550 universities are incorporating these peace and conflict studies, and he has written more than 170 books focusing to this harmony, peace, conflict, and this is conflict transformations, and among others. Similarly, he also has written more than 1,500 this is editorials, particularly focusing to the trans and media service. This much for now. Thank you so much to you all. We didn't hear.
So much, Bishnu bhai, and how lovely that you felt, the affection of a father from Johan Galtung, but a father who is also a friend. How lovely. So now I invite Dr. Alok Tandon, please. And with respect, I request Dr. Tandon and Gianluigi to begin with to speak for 10 minutes, and then we will have a little bit of discussion. And also we have Randhir, so we have 3 speakers. So now from now onwards, so
10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
Please.
थैंक यू वेरी मच, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। रणधीर जी ने मुझे इसमें हिस्सा लेने के लिए इनवाइट किया और कहा आप कुछ हिंदी में बोलिएगा, जबकि मेरे पास समय बिल्कुल नहीं था। कल ही उन्होंने बोला, लेकिन मैं सबसे पहले तो उनको धन्यवाद दूंगा, फिर इस पटल पे जो लोग जुड़े हुए हैं उनको मैं नमस्कार बोलूंगा, अभिवादन करूंगा, और मैं इस बात की ओर सबसे पहले इशारा करूंगा कि आखिर मैं क्यों इनकी बात से जुड़ गया इसमें। मेरी आवाज आ रही है? हेलो?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
हाँ,
yes.
तो सच बात ये है कि मेरा कोई व्यक्तिगत परिचय प्रोफेसर जानटुंग से नहीं है, और बड़ा अच्छा लगा जब दो लोगों ने मुझसे पहले बताया कि वो किस तरीके के व्यक्ति थे और किस तरीके का पॉलिटिकल पीस एक्टिविज्म उन्होंने किया और उनके क्या कंट्रीब्यूशंस हैं। लेकिन जब मैं देखता हूँ उनके अवदानों को, तो मुझे लगता है कि ऐसी कौन सी बात थी जिसने मुझे सबसे ज्यादा प्रभावित किया, और उसमें ये बात निकल के आती है कि जब मैंने हिंसा पर समझने की कोशिश की और गांधी को समझा कुछ दूर तक, तो उसके बाद मुझे लगा कि रास्ता कहीं पे जाके रुक रहा है। तभी उसी समय ये धारणा जो थी संरचनात्मक हिंसा की सामने आई, और उसने बहुत सारी ऐसी दुविधाओं का को साफ किया कि किस तरीके से हिंसा जो है केवल डायरेक्ट इनडायरेक्ट व्यक्तिगत नहीं है, बल्कि वो समाज की संरचना में भी व्याप्त हो सकती है, भले ही वो ऐसे सामान्यतया दिखाई न देती हो। लेकिन इसके बाद जब उन्होंने एक तीसरा अवधारणा दी, एक प्रत्यय दिया, वो था कल्चरल वायलेंस का, तो उस सांस्कृतिक हिंसा की जो अवधारणा को मैंने पढ़ा, समझा और जाना, तो मुझे लगा कि ये तो बहुत ही बड़ा कंट्रीब्यूशन है प्रोफेसर जॉन गाल्टुंग का अपने समय को समझने के लिए और हिंसा का व्यापक ऐतिहासिक स्वरूप समझने के लिए। और बड़ी आसानी से जब हम लोग संस्कृत के नाम पर मिसगाइड होते हैं या किए जाते हैं, तब उस समय ऐसा जो आज का समय है, ये एक जो गांटुंग की जो अवधारणा है वो बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण हो जाती है। और इसमें क्या खास बात है, इसकी परिभाषा तो यहाँ सब विद्वान है, लेकिन फिर भी मैं दोहराना चाहूंगा कि सांस्कृतिक हिंसा का अध्ययन उस प्रक्रिया को प्रकाश में लाता है जिससे प्रत्यक्ष हिंसा के कर्म और संरचनागत हिंसा के तथ्य का वैधीकरण होता है, और इस प्रकार वो समाज में स्वीकरणीय हो जाती है। सांस्कृतिक हिंसा की कार्य पद्धति किसी भी कर्म के नैतिक स्वरूप को लाल अनुचित के बजाय हरा उचित या कम से कम पीला स्वीकरणीय दिखा देना है। तो इस तरीके से सांस्कृतिक हिंसा जो है वो समाज में व्याप्त प्रत्यक्ष और संरचनात्मक हिंसा को एक वैधीकरण देने का, एक औचित्य प्रदान करने का, एक लेजिटिमेसी देने का कार्य करती है, और इस तरीके से वो उन दोनों को जो है प्रत्यक्ष और संरचनात्मक हिंसा को और अधिक घातक बना देती है। और साथ ही साथ वो जिनके प्रति की जा रही है वो स्वयं भी जो है वो उसके प्रति ऐसे अनुकूलित हो जाते हैं कि वो समाज में स्वीकरणीय दिखाई देती है। ऐसा नहीं लगता कि अन्याय अन्याय है, शोषण शोषण है, बहिष्करण बहिष्करण है, और जो जो किसी भी तरीके का जो अलगाववाद है वो कहीं पर जो है स्वीकरणीय हो जाता है, एक्सेप्टेड हो जाता है। और मुझे लगता है कि जब हम इस चीज को, इस कंसेप्ट को, इस प्रत्यय को जो है वो अपने समय पे लागू करने की कोशिश करते हैं, तो हमारे सामने बहुत सी ऐसी बातें खुलना शुरू हो जाती हैं जो कि हमको पहले ठीक से समझ में नहीं आती थी। जैसे उन्होंने ये बात पे बहुत जोर दिया कि सांस्कृतिक हिंसा में जो है धर्म, विचारधारा, भाषा, कलाएं और अनुभाविक और जो औपचारिक विज्ञान है, इनका रोल, इन सब का जो है प्रयोग जो है वो संरचनात्मक हिंसा और सीधी हिंसा को, डायरेक्ट हिंसा को, प्रत्यक्ष हिंसा को वैध करने के लिए किया जाता है। अब ये देखने की बात है कि किस तरीके से यह जो है वो संरचना, जो कल्चरल वायलेंस है वो कार्य करता है। तो इसके लिए मैं बजाय इसके कि जिस तरीके का सैद्धांतिक विश्लेषण उन्होंने किया उस पर न जाकर मैं इसी कंसेप्ट को जो है अपने अपने समय में लागू करने की कोशिश करूंगा। और मैं ये बताना चाहता हूं कि मेरे विचार से किसी भी विचारक की, महान विचारक की सफलता और प्रासंगिकता भी इसी में है कि वो हमारे समय को की चुनौतियों को समझने में हमें कितनी मदद देती है और कितनी अंतर्दृष्टि के साथ हम उसको समझ सकते हैं। तो सबसे पहले यदि हम लें अपने यहाँ की सांप्रदायिक हिंसा। अब सांप्रदायिक हिंसा के साथ अक्सर ये सोचा जाता है कि ये जो है वो राजनीतिज्ञों द्वारा जो है वो अपने हितों के लिए जो है वो इस्तेमाल किया जाता है, दो पक्षों को लड़ाने के लिए। लेकिन यहीं पर हम ये भूल जाते हैं कि इसके वैधीकरण के लिए धर्म की विभिन्न मान्यताओं का प्रयोग होता है। जैसे कि आप जानते हैं धर्म युद्ध है, जिहाद है, या इस तरीके की तमाम अवधारणाएं धर्म के साथ जुड़ी रहती हैं जिसमें धर्म की रक्षा की बात होती है। तो ये एक तरीके से इनको सामने लाकर जो है वो इस बात का वैधीकरण होता है कि हिंसा जो है वो जायज है। और इस तरीके से हम जो है भूल जाते हैं कि जो वैमनस्य है इसको जो है बड़ी आसानी से जो है हम स्वीकार कर लेते हैं और उसके साथ जुड़ी हुई हिंसा को भी स्वीकार कर लेते हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि हमको जैसे कि एक टेररिस्ट है उसको ही समझाया जाता है कि वो तो उसको एक ईश्वरीय कार्य कर रहा है, उसके परिणाम स्वरूप उसको जो है भविष्य में जो है जन्नत मिलने वाली है। तो इस तरीके की जो बातें हैं उसके दिमाग में जो आती हैं, तो वो हिंसा करते समय इस बात की पर जरा भी चिंता नहीं करता है कि कहीं पर से वो अनैतिक कार्य कर रहा है। इसी तरीके से अब अपने यहाँ की जाति व्यवस्था को ले सकते हैं। जाति व्यवस्था को अगर समझने की कोशिश करें तो इसके पीछे जो है वो एक बहुत लंबा इतिहास है। लेकिन क्यों ये हमेशा से चलती आ रही है, इसके लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि हम जो हमारे यहाँ पूर्वजन्म और कर्म फलवाद की धारणाएं हैं उनको समझने की कोशिश करें। ये जो विश्वास है ये सांस्कृतिक धार्मिक विश्वास है और ये किसी भी निम्न जाति के व्यक्ति को या शोषित व्यक्ति को ये समझाने की कोशिश करते हैं कि यह आपके पूर्व जन्मों के कर्मों का फल है। और इस तरीके से वो इसको स्वीकार कर लेता है। उसके अंदर जो विरोध भाव, जो विद्रोह भाव पैदा हो सकता था वो दब जाता है। इसी तरीके से जो उच्च वर्ग के लोग, उच्च जाति के वर्ग उसका शोषण करते हैं, वो भी किसी अपराध बोध से मुक्त हो जाते हैं कि हम कहीं पर कोई गलत काम कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि हमको ये सारे कुछ जो है अधिकार, वर्चस्व, शक्ति जो है वो पिछले जन्मों के कर्मों से प्राप्त हुई है। इसी तरीके से अगर हम इसी कल्चरल वायलेंस के कंसेप्ट को जो है लैंगिक अन्याय के लिए लाएं तो हम जानते हैं कि ये पितृसत्ता से जुड़ी हुई बात है। लेकिन किस तरीके से सारे अपब्रिंगिंग में ये समझाया जाता है कि महिलाओं को ऐसे रहना चाहिए, लड़कियों को यूं व्यवहार करना चाहिए, लड़कों को जो है ज्यादा मैस्कुलिन ढंग से व्यवहार करना चाहिए, स्त्रियों को ज्यादा समर्पित ढंग से रहना चाहिए। और इस तरीके से स्त्रियों को अपनी जो द्वयम स्थिति है उसके प्रति एक अनुकूलन पैदा किया। तो यहाँ पर भी हम देखते हैं कि हमारे जो विश्वास है, सांस्कृतिक विश्वास जिसमें तरह तरह के आदर्श हैं पुराने महाकाव्यों के, तो उसमें ये दिखाने की कोशिश होती है कि एक आदर्श चरित्र क्या हो सकता है और उस आदर्श चरित्र के जरिए किस तरीके से जो उनका लैंगिक अन्याय है उसको जस्टिफाई किया जाता है। इसी तरीके से आज के समय में बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बात यह है कि हम राष्ट्रवाद की जो विचारधारा है उसको समझने की भी कोशिश करें। राष्ट्रवाद की विचारधारा जो है, जैसा कभी बताया कि उन्होंने अपनी ऑटोबायोग्राफी में लिखा कि वो किसी को भी किसी जगह को बिलोंग नहीं करते, किसी पर्टिकुलर जगह को। लेकिन राष्ट्रवाद की विचारधारा तो एक खास टेरिटरी, एक खास रेस, एक खास तरीके के विश्वास, एक खास तरीके का विशेष कल्चर को लेके चलती है। और फिर आजकल जो 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 जिसको सांस्कृतिक राष्ट्रवाद कहते हैं वो एक तरीके के इस तरीके का एक्सक्लूसिविस्टिक राष्ट्रवाद होता है कि वो एक अन्य का सृजन करता है। उसमें जो लोग उसमें नहीं आते वो उसके विरोधी हो जाते हैं और उनको वो राष्ट्रद्रोही करके उसके प्रति जो है वो हिंसा को बढ़ावा ही खाली नहीं देता, उस हिंसा को वो जस्टिफाई भी करता है। और अभी अभी जिक्र आया है कि किस तरीके के फिलिस्तीन और जो इसराइल का युद्ध है। अब इसराइल के लोग ये अगर मानते हैं कि वो तो उनकी पवित्र भूमि है और पवित्र भूमि की रक्षा उन्हें करनी है, वो उनके लिए उसको पाना जस्टिफाइड है, और यही बात फिलिस्तीन वाले भी कह सकते हैं। तो इस तरीके के जो विश्वास हैं, इनसे जो है वो हिंसा को हमेशा बढ़ावा मिलता रहेगा, और ये जब तक इनको बदलने की कोशिश नहीं की जाती तब तक जो है हिंसा से मुक्त नहीं हुआ जा सकता। इसी तरीके की शिक्षा है, शिक्षा जो है आज एक औद्योगिक समाज में आपको फिट होने के लिए जो है शिक्षा दी जा रही है, लेकिन वो एक तरीके का अनुकूलन भी है, वो एक तरीके की व्यक्तिगत व्यक्ति के ऊपर हिंसा भी है। तो ये एक बहुत ही सूक्ष्म तरीके का जो हिंसा का कार्य शिक्षा करती है, और उसके जरिए जो है तरह तरह की विचारधाराओं को समर्थन भी प्राप्त कर देने की कोशिश होती है। तो ये भी एक कल्चरल वायलेंस, ये सांस्कृतिक हिंसा का ही एक रूप है। इसी तरीके से भाषा है, भाषाएं आपने हमारे यहाँ बहुत सारी समाप्त हो गई हैं, और अंग्रेजी के वर्चस्व के जरिए जो है वो आज भी जो है वो एक तरीके का एक उसको अंग्रेजी जानने वालों को एक श्रेष्ठता, एक तरीके का वर्चस्व, एक तरीके की समाज में शक्ति, ये सब प्राप्त होती है। तो ये भी भाषा का भी प्रयोग जो है वो हिंसा के लिए किया जा सकता है। तो इस तरीके से जो ये विचार दिया है हमको गाल्टुंग ने, इसको हम बड़े ही अच्छे ढंग से अपने समय की में जो हिंसा है उसको समझने के लिए कर सकते हैं, और फिर उससे ये समझ में आता है कि केवल जो है एक संरचना का विरोध करने से काम नहीं चलेगा, उसके पीछे जो सांस्कृतिक विश्वास है, उसके पीछे जो धार्मिक विश्वास है, उनको भी जो है उनके भी खिलाफ संघर्ष करना पड़ेगा, उनको भी बदलने की कोशिश करनी पड़ेगी, और इसके बगैर जो है हिंसा का अंत नहीं हो सकता। तो यहाँ पर आके मैं अपनी बात को समाप्त करने से पहले 2-3 बातें जरूर करना चाहूंगा कि सबसे पहली बात, गाल्टुंग ने हिंसा को एक विस्तारित रूप दिया, व्यक्तिगत हिंसा से संरचनात्मक और संरचनात्मक से जब जो सांस्कृतिक हिंसा तक ले गए, तो इससे हिंसा का जो बहुत बड़ा व्यापक स्वरूप सामने आता है, और इसीलिए उनका जो पीस का, जो शांति का जो प्रत्यय है, जो उसकी, वो भी बहुत विस्तारित हो जाता है, लेकिन साथ ही साथ वो बहुत ज्यादा चुनौतीपूर्ण भी हो जाता है, और उसको पाने के लिए जो है वो सामान्य ढंग से जो है सफलता उसमें पाना आसान नहीं है, ये बहुत चुनौतीपूर्ण है। साथ ही साथ उन्होंने हमको सांस्कृतिक हिंसा के इस प्रत्यय से संस्कृतियों को समझने का, परखने का, मूल्यांकन करने का एक क्राइटेरिया दिया, मानदंड दिया। उन्होंने समझाया कि संस्कृतियां कोई रखी हुई, कोई हमेशा बनी रहने वाली, शाश्वत, हमेशा इटर्नल, एक कोई ग्लोरीफाइड कोई ऐसी चीज नहीं है जिनको कि आपको वैसे ही का वैसा स्वीकार करना है। उनमें द्वंद्व होता है, उनमें अंतर विरोध होता है, और इसके बाद उनके अंदर सांस्कृतिक हिंसा भी पनपती है। तो इसलिए जरूरी है कि हम सांस्कृतिक पुनर्निर्माण करने की बात सोचें, और उसके अंदर जो इस तरीके के सांस्कृतिक हिंसा के तत्व हैं उनको बड़े ही आलोचनात्मक ढंग से देखें, और उनका निस्तारण करके एक नई संस्कृति का निर्माण करने का प्रयास करें। और उसके लिए बहुत जरूरी है कि जो आज हमारे सामने जो बहुत बड़ा शोर मचा हुआ है, ये मैं बात अपनी समाप्त कर रहा हूं, कि उपनिवेशीकरण का शोर मचाया जा रहा है, कि हमारे ऊपर जो है वो सांस्कृतिक वर्चस्व पश्चिम का लाद दिया गया है। लेकिन यहीं पर हमें सतर्क रहना पड़ेगा, और गाल्टुंग की जो अंतर्दृष्टि है उसका उपयोग करते हुए हमें ये भी देखना पड़ेगा कि कहीं न कहीं हम इस उपनिवेशीकरण का जो झंडा लहराया जा रहा है, इसके पीछे कहीं हम आंतरिक उपनिवेशीकरण की तरफ तो नहीं बढ़ रहे हैं। क्या हम अपनी जो हिंसक विश्वास और धारणाएं हैं उनको फिर से चिपटने के लिए, उनको वैधीकरण करने के लिए, उनका औचित्य देने का प्रयास तो नहीं कर रहे हैं? तो मैं समझता हूं कि इस अंतर्दृष्टि के साथ हम जो जॉन गाल्टुंग को याद करें, और अपने समय, अपने समाज की चुनौतियों का सामना करने के लिए उनका आज मैं नमन करता हूं, उनको श्रद्धांजलि देता हूं, और मैं समझता हूं कि मेरे वैचारिक यात्रा में कहीं न कहीं उनका एक अवदान है, स्थान है। धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू आलोक भाई, डॉक्टर आलोक टंडन,
थैंक यू।
थैंक यू सो मच। एंड वो जो सांस्कृतिक हिंसा मगर सांस्कृतिक पुनर्रचना cultural reconstruction. And peace के बारे में जॉन गाल्टुंग बोलते हैं in Globalization of God, peace as a joint project. So as a joint project from violence towards non-violence. So now Gianluigi, please.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I have collected some notes on the work of Galtung, of Professor Galtung, and I would I would like to concentrate myself especially on the concept of cultural violence, because it is at least the concept which most interested me, and in particular the distinction between the three aspects: cultural, structural, and direct violence. I think that cultural violence, these distinctions, the differentiation between the three aspects of violence can teach us very much as regards the way of operating against violence, and again on the ways of understanding the dynamics of violence and the functioning of violence. In truth, one can see very well, of course, examples of direct violence in society and between nations, can see very well also the dimension of structural violence, but perhaps to see and to be aware of the importance of the relevance of cultural violence is much more difficult. But it is exactly, precisely the aspect of cultural violence which should serve the greatest study, the greatest attention, and the greatest inquiry, because it is at the end of the day on the basis of everything. And in fact, in truth, the cultural violence constitutes the legitimization of structural violence. It is something which serves to justify both direct violence and and structural violence. And the problem is that, of course, in order to elaborate a plan against violence as such in society, one has to analyze in details the way in which the cultural violence in society is structured. Galtung presents so to speak, a counter-action against violence, insofar as he sees and says that the cultural peace against cultural violence should be the aspect of culture which serve to justify the direct peace and the structural peace. That is, we have two triads of phenomena, that is cultural violence, structural violence, and direct violence on the one hand, and on the other hand, the cultural peace, the structural peace, and direct peace. And the two triads should be studied and analyzed contemporarily. Now, coming to the question of cultural violence, why it is so important, so relevant? Because cultural violence is that which dominates the minds. It is a problem of mind, individual mind, and of the collective minds, insofar as cultural violence makes direct and structural violence seem right. That is, it produces in the individual and the society a sort of feeling of justification for some aspect of violence. And therefore, it is much, much more dangerous than the other ones, than the other aspect. Cultural violence renders direct violence and structural violence accepted in society. This is a problem of the cultural violence, and this is why cultural violence is so dangerous, because it is the basis of the minds, because it forms the minds, and because it is something which, so to speak, canalize the minds in a structure in which the minds of the people do not ask any question any longer. That is, they accept the violence, the structural violence and direct violence. And they do not question the the presence of violence in society. And therefore, cultural violence is ideologically the first aspect on which those who want to justify violence in society and to let, so to speak, society be accepted, to let violence be accepted in society, work on. And cultural violence, the violent structure, for instance, are, well, as examples, Galtung mentions, for instance, the exploitation, the leaving people in state of misery, of illness and malnutrition. But at the basis, there is a cultural violence which let these status be accepted. That is, of course, also there are further examples which he makes throughout his works, throughout his writings. He mentions, for instance, marginalization and fragmentation as further examples of structural violence. But the problem is these aspects of structural violence are legitimated by cultural violence. He makes an interesting distinction between direct violence, which is, in his opinion, an event, structural violence, which is a process, and cultural violence, which is, to be noted, it is an invariant, a permanence. Therefore, it is really the basis, the layer, the foundation of the society as regard the aspects of violence which are in the society. And it is also the aspect which is not so simple to be seen, not so simple to be ascertained. That is, we can see very well cultural, direct violence, structural violence, but we do not see the foundation. And therefore, we do not understand why there is violence in the society. On which grounds this violence? And therefore, the sociology should analyze any time in which it is confronted with cultural violence, with the presence of violence in society, the layer of cultural violence. He makes, for instance, the examples of the situation, the conditions of past conditions and present conditions of Afro-American in the United States. And this is, of course, he says, of course, well, the direct violence was the enslavement, of course, the transportation of the slaves, of the Afro-American as Africans as slaves to the United States. But then the structural violence, which has been affirmed, which has had and has a condition of perdurance, is the discrimination. This is structural violence, but at the basis of everything, there is a prejudice. The cultural prejudice. Those Afro-Americans are not so American as other people. They are inferior to other people, and therefore the conditions in which they live are justified because they are inferior. That is, the conditions in which Afro-American, the humiliation in which Afro-American should live, are compelled to live, is, so to speak, justified and rendered, so to speak, acceptable and favored by this cultural violence, which is based on the prejudice of the inferiority of the Afro-Americans. This is an example, but of course, one can find different examples.
One can replace it, and it left us with an impact on how to learn things in life. And
different examples of these triads, cultural, structural, and direct violence in every society and every historical periods. And of course, well, the interest of Galtung are also moved by, for instance, the certain form of religions in which, for instance, a people is considered as the chosen by God, and whereas all the other peoples are refused by God. So very many phenomena in the culture can give origin to discrimination and to episodes of structural violence. Therefore, the range of the analysis of Galtung is always very, very deep and very, very extended. And of course, Galtung directs his attention to, for instance, the the question of exploitation. That is, he says, for instance, why it is so that exploitation in the society is so often accepted, so often accepted. And he say, well, many times, not always, but many times, there is a process in which a particular range of people are dehumanized. They are dehumanized culturally. That is, they say, well, they are not so human as other people, or they are not human at all, and therefore there is a justification to exploit them. Exploitation is abandoned. That is, it is not an exploitation. This is the status in which they should live because they are inferior. So the moral concept of exploitation is cancelled in the mind of the people who live normal lives, because they have been convinced that particular people, a particular layer of people, can be exploited because they are inferior, and therefore they are in the place which they deserve. This kind of reasoning is to be found very much in the societies, in different societies, past and present societies, in different. Interesting, very interesting is, in my opinion, to conclude that Galtung also directs his attentions to two aspects of Gandhi's thought, which are very important, essential for him in his meditation. One aspect is the unity of life, which, in his opinion, is of course something which tends at least to contrast, to oppose every form of cultural violence. And the other aspects of Gandhi's which very much interest Galtung in his meditation is Gandhi's unity of means and ends, because also this is an aspect, a structure, a foundation of a mind, of a mentality, which opposes the conception that some people can be discriminated. No, because of course, if there is a unity of means and ends in the humanity, then there is no people who can be discriminated. Therefore, the conception of a movement of cultural peace, like unity of means and ends in Gandhi, is a basis in order to eliminate at least some aspects of cultural violence. Cultural peace, therefore, in this aspect of Gandhi, can produce a condition of structural peace, cultural peace against cultural violence, structural peace against structural violence, and structural peace can bring to the events, so to speak, of direct peace, that is of behavior inspired by peace, of facts of peace, which of course opposes the cases of direct violence. And yeah, I would like to conclude my intervention. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gianluigi. So along with cultural peace and structural peace, what is also what can be called as the soul peace. And as we think with Galtung, and whether Galtung was also equally attentive to the calling of what can be called as soulful peace, along with structural peace and cultural peace. And now, Randhir, please. Randhir?
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, on behalf of so there's a we feel very for all of us, Professor Galtung, his study on peace building have left an think about his points would have, very central to Galtung's quest. And we know Africa's last, stage of his life. He met Galtung, and Jayaprakash Narayan was also very much interested in building peace studies movement in India. And when Jayaprakash Narayan met uh, Galtung, Galtung visited Banaras and his Gandhian studies, and he was invited many times by Jayaprakash Narayan. So, so we know Galtung's contributions also in terms of Indian society. Not only defined the discipline, but also his praxis, which uh,
So hello Randhir. Sometimes the voice is breaking. Maybe there is an internet problem. So as we are hearing now, let us have some discussions, please. Friends, please bring question, comments, and conversations. Let me invite Man Bahadur Bhai. Okay, he's taking some time. Raja Nandini, please. Nandini. Hello. Okay, Rohan, please. Rohan Moses. Hello, Rohan.
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, Dr. Giri.
Hello.
Hello, Randhir. We could not hear the last 2 to 3 minutes you spoke.
Okay.
There was some network
So,
problem.
so I just.
Please go ahead.
But I was just concluding, basically I am very much influenced by his 1959 work where Galtung founded the Peace Research Institute Oslo. And this institution, the first institution of its kind, because that institution dedicated to the systematic study of the conditions of peaceful relations. And that is very, very important. When I go through his journals, Peace Research in 1964, that was also very, new initiative in that sense. And I found his conception of trilogy, which is very, very important in that sense, because he understands violence with structural violence and with cultural violence. And he developed this conflict triangle as a tool for analyzing the dynamics of conflict that includes contradiction, that is the conflict itself, attitude, the parties' perceptions, and behavior, the parties' action. So this model is very, very important in in order to understand the comprehensive way of understanding the peace. And this model has been instrumental to conflict resolution and peace negotiation.
So thank you, Randhir. So now, Rowan, please.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Vishnu, for introducing Galtung and Professor Alok. I'm sorry, I'm from Chennai, so I struggle to understand Hindi, so I tried my best. I tried my best. And thank you, Gianluigi, for talking about the depth of cultural violence and how it enables and makes other forms of violence seem normal, and that it is ideological. I'm reminded of the work of René Girard, who talks about the violence inherent in our mythic structures as well. But most importantly, I was thinking about what Mahatma Gandhi said about ahimsa and the soul force, and he opposed it to brute force. So but we apply it only in terms of direct violence, the idea of brute force. But anything that is violent has brute force in it. So even cultural violence is a form of brute force. It's a form of this what we call this asuric energies that are bringing us devolving human beings. And secondly, this form of darkness or this form of spiritual lack is what constitutes cultural violence. And for that, Galtung gives non-violence, which is very Gandhian, and empathy. Empathy is feeling with the other, feeling the pain that the other is feeling because of the violent structures that are inherent in our systems. And what I like the most is his solution, collaborative creativity, which is a form of positive peace. And I was also thinking that our technological systems are also a form of violence because they do not consider what we need as a species for peace. So I was reminded of a Russian cosmist called Fyodorov. He says that he talks about the common cause. So he wants to use science to resurrect dead humans. But I was thinking, well, if science and technology is proceeding towards something to do with peace, but not merely with advancing peace for the present generation, but also for the past, the future generation, this would be a good way to even think about non-violent science. So these are the thoughts that came into my mind during this session.
Thank you. Thank you, Rowan. Now we have Manya with us. Manya. Okay, Manya is taking some time. Then Minati, please.
Hello, am I audible? I'm just traveling, so am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you. I thank our chief speaker today, Professor Vishnu Pathak, and other discussions were very enriching. But as I am need little bit time for reflection, I don't have such any questions, so I can come back like some other time. And thank you. I don't have any such questions today.
Okay. And any other friends who would like to raise a question? So if not, we will come to a provisional, summing up. So Minati, you can propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you. I'm Minati Pradhan on behalf of Sadhya Chakra and Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming. would like to thank our today's chief presenter, Professor Vishnu Pathak, for his very deep presentation. I also would like to thank the people who had made the discussion more enriched, like Professor Gianluigi, Johan, Randhir, Professor Alok Tandon. So I thank all of them, and I also would like to thank our Zoom participants and the Facebook participants for being present with us and learning with us. So please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name. So I thank all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And today, all Professor Vishnu Pathak, Dr. Alok Tandon, Gianluigi, Randhir, they were co-presenters. So we thank everybody. And we look forward to our journey together.